How do you respond when someone tells you bad news or good news? It turns out that being good at conversation requires more than just finding the right words. I'm Avi Arditi. Coming up, our guest Jane Mars is going to give us some tips about being a good conversationalist. Jane writes the Ask the Editor column for Merriam-Webster at learnersdictionary.com. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Avi. So, yes, today I'd like to talk about something that you may not be aware of, but that you need to have successful conversations in English. And that is good listening skills. So, first I'm going to explain what it means to be a good listener, and then I'd like to teach you some tips for being a good listener in two specific situations. When someone shares some good news with you, and when someone shares some bad news.
Go ahead.
So let's start. What does it mean to be a good listener? If someone asked me that question, I would probably say, listen really carefully, pay attention to everything they say, try to remember everything that the speaker says, and of course those things are important. But there's more. There's stuff that you really might not think about that's just as important.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff is communicating back to the speaker, giving the speaker information. And we call that information cues. So, Avi, if you could put up the first slide,
okay.
Let's take a look at what cues actually do.
All right, and this is all part of, I've heard this called active listening. Is this what we're talking about? Or?
Yes, it is a kind of active listening. It's not just being a passive listener and sort of sitting there and letting it come to your ear. It's stuff that you need to do in what we call the back channel to give the speaker some feedback. So is that slide up now, Avi?
The slide is up, and it says...
So what do cues do? They tell the speaker, first of all, that you're listening. You're not just off thinking about something else. You understand what they're saying. Like it's making sense to you, and that you're interested.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you might not really be interested. That can happen. And my advice is, if you want this conversation to go well, pretend. It's easy to do. You want to convey a sense of interest in what the other person is saying. If you want that conversation to keep going.
Right.
So, and we've all done it, of course. So now, what kind of cues do you give? Well, Avi, if you would pull up the second slide.
Okay. And let's pull that up. Right. Give it a second. Okay. The second slide is now up.
Thank you. So what kinds of cues can you give? Well, you can basically divide it into two groups. There's the things that we call body language, and that can be moving just your head, so like this. You can use facial expressions. I'm going to take my glasses off for this one.
Well, hold on. Let me get you back on the shot here.
Okay.
Whoops. One more click, and we're trying to get you back here. Oops. There you are. Okay, you're back.
Okay, so you can use a facial expression. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's if you hear really startling news, right?
Or you can use your whole body. So like, you can lean in. I want to hear more. I'm really interested. All kinds of things you can do. Okay, and then there's the spoken language cues, and that's a little more obvious. It's words you can say and also sounds you can make, like and yes, you want to say these things even while the other person is talking. And that, I think, is one of the things that people who don't speak English as a first language or who aren't really deeply immersed in the culture might not realize. You're supposed to talk even while the speaker is saying something. Not maybe like completely interrupt them, unless you're from New York, where that's considered normal, but
Yeah.
talk with them. Okay, so we're going to try it. And I want you to see how this works. When I'm going to be the speaker, and Avi's going to be the listener. And Avi, if we could have the camera on you,
Okay.
so that people can watch what you're doing while I'm talking to you. So let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. Go right ahead.
Good. All right. So, Avi, you know what bacteria are, right? Like they're little microscopic things that can get in our bodies and make us sick. So it turns out that there are, of course, those bad bacteria that make us sick, but there are also good bacteria.
Oh, that's right.
Actually turn out that they help keep us healthy. And I was listening to something on the radio last night. There's apparently a whole new frontier in medicine. They call it the microbiome, so very tiny life. And they're referring to all of the good bacteria that are in our bodies that keep us healthy. And not only that, but they're finding out that there are some like pretty serious illnesses that can be treated by giving us some of the good bacteria that we might be lacking. So things like infections, diabetes, obesity. Like these are all ailments that they think can now be treated using good bacteria. Okay, so we're going to stop here. And listeners and watchers, I want you to just think about what you saw and heard Avi do. So he definitely said things. He definitely used his face. He nodded. He conveyed interest to me, and he responded. And if he hadn't done any of those things, and I'd been looking at him and waiting, it's kind of like when you're on the phone and you're talking, and this has definitely happened to me, and you realize nothing's coming back. You don't hear anything, and after a while, you kind of go, hey, are you there? Because if the person's there, they are expected to say something. That's part of being a good listener.
Well, here to jump in for a second. I mean, I've heard it said. We had a guest on once who described, I guess, in American culture, conversational practice is it's almost like a basketball game where you look to jump in and get the ball, and as soon as you spot a break in when another person is talking, this you said earlier, you're expected to talk a little over the other person. Whereas in other cultures, it's more formal and it's disrespectful to jump in. I mean, has this been your, what do you think about that? What do you advise people?
Like when in Rome, the expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans. If you want to be engaged with someone who's speaking English, that's what they expect from you. They expect you to do that. It's a sign of enjoyment of the conversation, interest in the conversation, engagement in the conversation. And if you don't give them that feedback, their feelings will be hurt.
As opposed to waiting for your turn, so to speak, as you might in other cultures.
Exactly. So. And I mean, as I mentioned, it's part of New York's speaking culture, and this is documented by academics, that you are not supposed to just nod and say, you're supposed to interrupt and grab the floor away, and that is a sign of positive engagement and interest.
Now you might not want to do that in a job interview, right, or talking to a professor or something.
That's a good point. But I guess what I'm saying is, if a New Yorker does it to you, it's a sign of their enthusiasm, so take it as a positive.
Now what about, well, just off the side, what about in Los Angeles or another part of the country? I guess it's different places maybe are less, people might think that's kind of rude if you interrupt them.
I think so, yeah.
So, well, sorry for interrupting. So let me go ahead.
Not at all, I like it. So, all right, now I want to talk about specific cues that you can use to respond to good news and bad news. Mm-hmm. So, Avi, if you could please bring up the third slide.
Okay, and we're going to, there we go, it is up. Responses to good news.
Exactly. So here are some things you can say when a friend or someone in a social conversation tells you something that they're obviously pleased about. So, of course, you can say, "That's great. Wow. Awesome. I'm so happy for you," is kind of a gentle, sort of more polite. And then, of course, "Congratulations. Fantastic." There are a bunch of these things. And I would kind of like to try it and see, Avi, if you're game for it. If you can you tell me about something positive that happened to you? And um, I'm going to respond.
Well, let's think about this.
Or it could be someone that you know.
Uh, something good. Well, I'm trying to develop a game show idea here, actually, and there seems to be some interest. A game show for English
That's
learners, and so that
fantastic.
well,
Good for
as we said,
you.
got to keep our fingers crossed. But
No, that's awesome. That sounds really good. Okay. So I said things to Avi. I also smiled, nodded my head. All right, and now let's try bad news. So Avi, if you would please bring us to the next slide.
okay, let's see if it's up, and let's pull up. Okay, responses to bad news.
Okay, so here are some of the things you can say. That's awful. Oh, and I want to mention in responding to bad news, a big part of it is your tone of voice. So you kind of want to speak in a lower tone of voice and convey, like, it's sort of a private thing that's going on. You don't want to be loud. You want to be quiet and low. So you should talk like this. "That's awful. Oh no." Or, okay, this is something that you might say when someone's passed away. "I'm so sorry."
Right.
A lot of people say, "I'm really sorry for your loss," is a common expression to use when someone's lost a loved one. Or, "I'm really sorry to hear this." And you can hear I sound quite serious.
Right.
There's also "That sucks." And I have a big warning sign there.
Just like in the dictionary, right?
It's not polite language. I would not say that to my mother. And you generally don't want to use it except with people who use it with you. So that's kind of your cue, your signal. If you have a friendship and the person says "that sucks" all the time, it's fine for you to say it too. If that's not how they talk, they may be slightly offended, and you might want to stay away from it. And as Avi mentioned, in a job interview, probably not so good.
But now, Jane, one point, getting back to you, we talked about the congratulations as being a response to good news. Now, I've noticed that we will often get, when we get email from people in our audience, they'll sometimes use congratulations in a way that typically, at least in American culture, we don't. Like, if someone gets a promotion or a new job, you say congratulations, or if they have a baby, you say congratulations. But it's not really meant, it's not used, in our culture at least, often for just as a synonym for "that's great" or "that's good" or I want to, as a term of praise for, "I really like your website," or "good program." You leave it at that rather than saying congratulations. But that's just something I've noticed it seems like maybe in other places people use that more in ways that we don't necessarily use.
Interesting. Okay, but you make a good point. Congratulations is kind of like a top-rung event. Like, for us, it should have some real significance. It's an accomplishment that probably took a while to happen. And the things you mentioned, having a new baby, getting a promotion at work, those are all, a new movie came out that you had something to do with. We would use congratulations for those. Probably not sort of an everyday event like, you found a faster way to get to work and you arrived early. You probably won't say congratulations.
Yeah, or maybe if it possibly in jest or something like
Right. If someone arrives every day late and today they come on time.
Congratulations. Then it
And
would
then you
be
can say,
it'd be
congratulations.
sarcastic, yeah, sarcastic, and
Yeah.
which is a whole different subject. But so now, any other tips you have for being a good conversationalist? For we often say making small talk, or showing that you're really listening and being sincere about it.
One more thing, and then I kind of want to stop because I want to leave people with just a small amount to digest. But very often when you want to show that you're really interested in what someone is talking about, you do what we call reflect back. So if Avi tells me about this new show and that he's really excited about it, and that he's thinking it's going to be really great for his career, I can pretty much say back to him what he's told to me in a way that tells him that I share his feelings. So Avi, can you try that one more time? Tell me about this new show that you're interested in.
Well, it's just an idea, just a thought we're talking about, but it could possibly be a game show, maybe for English learners, have some fun, and we'll see. We're just kind of in the earliest stages, so wish me luck.
I do wish you luck, and it sounds like, okay, you're not really sure it's going to happen, but if it does, it's going to be a great thing. Okay, so that's Jane telling Avi pretty much exactly what he told her, but now he knows I really heard him, and that I'm interested in what he said.
Right, I guess that's a skill in itself, where you don't want to sound like you're just parroting back because you've learned active listening skills, or where it really needs to be sincere to show that you understood. Wow, that's great, or I hope let me know what happens. Right? I mean, these are all ways to show
yes
interest, and that you really heard, and are thinking about what the person said.
Right. No, those are all great ideas. So I would just say, in closing, that it might be interesting for people to try some of these things the next time they have a conversation, and someone tells them either good news or bad news, to use one of these expressions. But then, just in general, when they're in a social conversation, to be sure that they're not just standing there listening passively, that they're always giving back to the speaker, to reassure the speaker that this conversation is interesting and that they're staying in it with them and they want to continue.
Well, I would love to continue this conversation, because I do find it very interesting, but we're going to leave it at that. And thank you, Jane Mars, Publishing Director for English Language Learning at Merriam-Webster in Springfield, Massachusetts. Check out her Ask the Editor column at learnersdictionary.com. And while you're online, you can read, listen, and learn with our programs at learningenglish.voanews.com and at the VOA Learning English channel on YouTube, where you can watch our previous Google Plus Hangouts. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and iTunes. I'm Avi Arditi in Washington. Thanks for hanging out with us.